to this motion from the grounds of the significance that we create to our development and the manner in which we as leaders in the Assembly, as well as leaders that are in government and other places, are focused solely and squarely on ensuring that Kenya does not only grow to improve, but indeed to realize its ideals. Mr. Speaker, it has been indicated that 78% of the population is younger than 35 years, and that 70% of those that we see are indeed unemployed. As I support this and thank Honorable Antonio Loch for bringing this into focus, I'd like us, Mr. Speaker, to focus on the significance of declaring a matter a national disaster. A number of times we are going to find that we confuse calamities or catastrophes, or we use language that would talk about anything that is tragic, and that we fail to acknowledge that when we are talking about a national disaster, we truly want to bring the attention of the entire country of not only the tragedy or the difficulties or the challenges, but indeed to point out that if it is not addressed, it is a matter that will affect everyone. We are talking, Mr. Speaker, about the youth, but in effect, we are really talking about our country, Kenya. We are talking about the elderly. We are talking about the women. We are talking about the children. I say this, Mr. Speaker, because if we look at the level of unemployment and we check the manner in which our youth, that we are clearly saying are a very significant percentage are affected, we will see that we have untold problems. We have all cases of insecurity. We have our youth being affected and sometimes losing hope and getting into drug abuse. We have situation declaration of youth unemployment as a national disaster, and in particular to ensure there's a fund to go with it. I conclude, Mr. Speaker, by saying that success is predictable and so is failure. And if we want to succeed in our agenda and to ensure that our country is sustained, we truly must take action and we must look to the issue of the youth. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Asante Bwana Spika kunipatia nafasi hii. Ningependa mwanzo kuchukua nafasi hii kumshukuru Mheshimiwa Oloch kwa jambo 9 ya Kenya youth hawajaajiriwa, ambao ni kiwango kikubwa ukipima pamoja na majirani zetu Tanzania, Uganda na wengine. County ninayowakilisha Lamu, Kenya Bureau of Standard also of Statistics walitoa 68%, ambao ni kiwango kikubwa sana ya vijana wetu hawajaajiriwa. Kutoajiriwa husababisha kuweka viwanda nyingi, vijana wetu kukosa kazi. Serikali pia kwa mipango yake saa nyingine husababisha watu wakakosa kazi zaidi. Kwa mfano Lamu, shirika la Lapset lilivyoanza limewafanya wavuvi wengi hawawezi kwenda baharini, kwa hiyo imechangia ukosefu wa ajira. Kiwanda ambacho kinataka kuwekwa cha kiwanda cha makaa. Sehemu hiyo kulikuwa na wakulima wamekaa hapo miaka 3 wakingojea walipwe, waliambiwa watalipwa, so wamekuwa hawalimi. Imekosesha pia kwa ukubwa kazi, ajira. Wengi tena ni vijana. Pia mpangilio wa serikali walivyoweka katazo la kukata mikoko limechangia pakubwa Lamu ukosefu wa ajira. Kwa kukisia familia 3,000 zimekosa ajira. So mipango hii itasaidia pakubwa. Na kitu kingine ambayo inachangia zaidi pia ni ile kutegemeana. Ukosefu wa ajira, wale ambao wana kazi wanakuwa wanategemewa na familia.
What Honorable Didi Nyoro seem to have pressed an intervention. What is out of order?
What is out of order?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just lining up for a contribution.
Yeah, but that is not the route to use. That is a backdoor route.
Blame my neighbor.
Use the front door.
Mr. Speaker, blame my neighbor for that.
Very well. Please, Honorable Mohammed, you have the floor.
Asante. Kutegemeana kwa lugha ya Kimombo tunaweza sema ni high dependency ratio, ambayo Kenya ni 75%. Wale kidogo ambao wameandikwa kazi ubidi wawasaidie wale wengine ambao hawajaandikwa kazi. Na Bwana Speaker, naomba mniongezee time yangu ilichukuliwa. Okay, mswada huu utaweza kuwapatia imani vijana na itawapatia matumaini, na itakuwa tumewasaidia hawa vijana wawe tofauti na miaka mingine iliyopita. So
yes, Honorable Mohammed, every member has 5 minutes, and we are scientific in measuring that. So you would have to organize your thoughts. Honorable Martin Owino.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this motion, and let me thank Mr. Honorable Antonio Lodge and Kiari, who seconded this. Mr. Speaker, this is also my passion. Little things can be big things. So this is a big one. In my constituency in Dewa, unemployment is among these youth are beyond the national average. Actually, it's about 65. Whether you're going to school or not, it's the same thing. Mr. Speaker, it is a disaster already in households and in my constituency. For example, there's a family of 5 children. They only had 5 oxen to plow their farm. And because the firstborn got admission in college, they had to dispose 1 oxen after the other. At the end of it, the lad finished the college, but retreated home, no job for the past 10 years. And this firstborn was supposed to get a job and uplift other siblings. That did not happen. So the poverty in this house has gone higher than any other family. And it is across the constituency. And I know this is across the country. That's why we are asking for a declaration of a national disaster. Mr. Speaker, when there is unemployment of this magnitude among the youth, it brings down the income, the living standard declines, the working power of the nation declines, revenue goes down, the productivity. Mr. Speaker, this is the year where the production of the country depends. The UN explains this as between 15 and 24, but now we are even spanning to the senior youth, even beyond 35. Somebody finishing a college and taking many years before they can even get a job. So when they fall into the frustration domain, then crime starts. Mr. Speaker, poverty is in the highest level because these people are not being absorbed into the work domain. Transfer of skills. When you finish education, you need to be engaged in order to maintain that. That is also going beyond, down the valley. This will have a domino effect. In fact, if we are not careful on this, Mr. Speaker, we may end up in a recession because we are not tapping into the productivity domain of these people. Mr. Speaker, I wonder if, let's for example, we are talking about the dual highway, Mombasa, 300 billion to be used. How about if we were to invest this money, even $1 billion per constituency, to build micro industries, to create jobs for these people? We would be improving lives, yes, but also taxes, because I say this is a productive age, where if you engage them in work, they will pay taxes. So I think, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Oluoch is right. We have to make a statutory arrangement so that even if loans are to be taken, this House should be consulted. Because I think we are crying of unemployment on the other side, but the decision that we make does not support what we are going through as a nation. Mr. Speaker, there is also a social aspect of this. Because of unemployment rate that high, debt is increasing, homelessness, migration to the cities to look for jobs, crimes.
Yes, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Speaker. I rise to support this motion for declaring a youth unemployment as a national disaster. I think the issue of the youth, Mr. Speaker, is very serious. Currently, we have so many graduates which are exiting various institutions with no hope of getting jobs. I know we've come up with the WESO Fund, the Youth Fund, but Mr. Speaker, these particular funds are not doing an effective job. This particular motion, seeking to establish a national fund along the lines of CDF, is a very noble thing, and I want to rise to say this is the line we need to support. We've seen that the WESO Fund is not doing what it was meant to be to do. It was meant to support the youth to start up various businesses, to be able to enable them to even get various jobs, but we are not achieving that. And I think the reason is that it is not a grant, it is a loan. The current WESO Fund, the Youth Fund, I know the WESO Fund is free of interest, but the Youth Fund and the Women Enterprise Fund are actually funds which are given out on the basis of interest rates. I think this particular agenda of the youth should be treated as one of the big four agendas. I know the idea of establishing a manufacturing sector to create jobs is a noble idea, but I think we can do a better job if we focus on constituencies. I'd like to say this particular motion of setting aside a certain percentage of funds specifically to support job creation for the youth is already an overdue agenda. I want to say that we will be solving the biggest unemployment which is going on at the moment. At the moment, the youth are looking for jobs everywhere, and they are not getting. In fact, one of the biggest challenges we have as members of parliament is the issue of placing the youth various jobs, to get various jobs. The government is not employing. There are actually low employment going on. Creation of jobs is also at a very low level. And therefore, if we specifically set aside funds to be able to focus on youth employment, to focus on job creation, especially at the constituency level, along the lines of CDF, I think a bigger success may be achieved. Currently, this issue of youth is really not being given as serious attention as supposed to be. I think when we talk of the big four, we are talking in terms of expanding the economy, but I think we should also have the agenda as a specific agenda. Therefore, I rise to say this motion is overdue, that we need to focus on the youth. We need to find a way in which we can increase employment. We can also support youth polytechnics to train more youth. This money, which this fund, if it's created, should specifically also be targeted at training the youth. That is giving them skills, especially sponsoring them to attend various youth polytechnics and DTIs. This will actually go a long way to reducing the youth unemployment, which is currently prevalent in the nation. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I rise to say I support this motion. It's been overdue. Thank you.
Honorable Mogaka Kemosi, member for West Mugirango. Very well. That member also seemed to have left the card behind. Honorable Osotsi Godfrey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to contribute to this very, very important motion by Madare Member of Parliament, my good friend, Honorable Anthony Oloch, to declare the national youth unemployment as a national disaster and establish the National Youth Fund. Mr. Speaker, this motion is timely because the youth of this country, who form over 75% of the population, are carriers of our social problem. Drug problem, poverty, unemployment, disease, crime, terrorism, all manner of social problems. The youth are the ones who suffer the most. And Mr. Speaker, the issue of youth is a critical issue that requires attention of all the leaders in this country. Because I think we have not given it the focus we need to give it as a country. I know a lot has been done in terms of affirmative action for women and even for other socially disadvantaged groups. But I think on matters to do with youth, we have handled them very casually. Recently, when we were discussing about the budget estimates, you saw most of the austerity measures that were done on the budget were directed to programs affecting the youth. We talk about incubators, they were removed from the budget. We talk about Konza City, it also experienced a budget cut. So that indicates to you, Mr. Speaker, that we are not taking matters of youth seriously. And yet, in the Vision 2030 that was formulated during President Kibaki's regime, the youth empowerment was identified as one of the things that are required to be done to propel this country in terms of development. But what has been done? We have a number of various youth initiatives, which I think Honorable Luoch is proposing that all these initiatives, be they the Youth Enterprise Development Fund, WEZO Fund, and whatever it is, be all amalgamated into the National Youth Fund. And I think that would be very progressive. But Mr. Speaker, I want to also say that we should not create a fund to give youth money the way the National Youth Enterprise Fund is doing, which has been turned into a political fund, where you go, you are given money, there is no commitment on repaying, and that money is being distributed on political lines. We want a fund that is progressive.
Support this motion, and I want to thank the Honorable Oluoch for this timely motion. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, this country we have always, because a lot of the good motions that come and the proposals that we do have in this country, they end up not reaching the people that they need to reach, because they end up being centered and administered in areas that are not exactly reaching the grassroots, and in this case, the rural areas don't get to feel this. So I do support that it would be good to have this, because obviously CDF has done very well. Many people have felt it. It has reached the far corners of this country, and I know that youths that are far out there in the villages would be able to access this benefit if this fund would be modeled around the CDF model. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, allow me to rope in the government's commitment on the Big Four. Mr. Speaker, if all of us speak to the Big Four as it stands now, nothing of that explains the role of the youth in the Big Four. If you talk about manufacturing, by the time the youth get access to that role of manufacturing, the bus would have already left. If you talk about affordable health care, again, it is the same thing, because if we do not empower the youth, then they're not able to plug into this big agenda that the government is driving. So I do believe that whereas the president meant well in this Agenda 4, I think if we do not move along with everybody alongside with us, then we shall have missed an opportunity to have a big proportion and a big population of this country also benefit and also help drive this agenda to its success, the success that we all envisage. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, when I grow up, Mr. Speaker, and I also have my own little thing, and I have an opportunity to do an Agenda 4, I think I'll do Agenda 4 as number 1 agenda, Youth Agenda 4 as Agenda 4, Agenda 2 of the youth agenda, Agenda 3, the youth, and Agenda 4, the youth, because that is the future of this country. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I support.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me a chance to also add my voice to this important motion. And let me just say that it is a motion that is familiar to many of us who have been here before. And therefore, even as we pass it, I think we need to start asking ourselves very hard questions as the leadership of this country, because this house is actually constituted by the leaders of this country. Mr. Speaker, we have a youth fund already in place. What do we need to do to the existing youth fund so that it adds more value to the youth of this country? What is it that is being done that has worked? And what has not worked, and what do we do about it? Because there's no need of reinventing the wheel as far as I'm concerned. We need first to know where we've gone wrong with what we have so that we know what needs to be done to make it better. Mr. Speaker, we have a very good program called the ACPO program that helps in access of youth, women, and persons with disability to the procurement of this country, of the government. The biggest spender in any nation is government. 30% of ACPO is supposed to go to that category of groups. Where have we gone wrong with ACPO? Why isn't it working to the point that out of the earmarked 200 billion that is supposed to support those sectoral groups that I've mentioned, they are doing less than somebody strategically ensuring that this money doesn't go to the youth, to the women, so that it continues to go to the same people over and over again? Are there certain obstacles that are still on the way of these young people, of these, the women and others, so that they are able to fully take advantage of this very good program? I think these are the questions we must begin to ask ourselves, because we will come here every term, pass very good things about youth, but very little is happening out there. Within ACPO, what stops you, the member of parliament, with your CDF from giving certain tenders to young youth-owned companies? Today, if we ask the members of parliament here who have CDF in their constituencies. Even affirmative action, how many of them have gone out of their way consciously to make sure they give tenders to youth-owned companies? I'm sure less than 5% will say, I have done it. So the challenge starts with all of us. It cannot be always pointing a finger and then Mufanye, you go do it. It must also start with we seated here. So I want us to go beyond lip service into real action. And while this motion is well intended by Mheshimiwa Oluoch, we must now make it happen. We must walk the talk. We must lead by example. Start with your CDF. Start with your affirmative action fund. And then let us hold government accountable to make sure that the programs they have in place do actually help the people they are intended to help. Let us see what went wrong with Youth Fund, what is happening with AGPO, and then from there we are sure we'll do the right thing. With those many remarks, I support, but I say let's go beyond talking. Let us act.
Honorable Bui Robert, member for Kadhiani.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. I think that was a very powerful presentation from the Deputy Whip of the majority. And I think it's important that we all realize that the future of this country is actually with the youth, and that it is our responsibility as members to also show direction and probably try and put these things into action. Mr. Speaker, from the presentation by the Honorable Oluoch, we are realizing here that 75% of this nation is of people aged below 35 years. And his request financially is only 5%. I mean, when you do that mathematics, I think it's really not asking for too much. Mr. Speaker, I've also done some simple mathematics, and I want to say that I'm happy with the Honorable Oluoch, being my colleague in this house, also a colleague in NASA, and also a colleague of victims of political violence, because our legs were broken one day apart from each other. I think he's done a very good thing. I've listened to these statistics, and we are talking about 55% of the youth being unemployed. That is 55% of 75% of the Republic, and that works out to actually 41.25% of the citizens of this country being unemployed. Mr. Speaker, I think that's obviously a national disaster. I am happy about my colleague who has talked about, the Honorable Cecily, has talked about there being many funds. It's true. We have the Youth Enterprise Fund, we have the Uwezo Fund, we have even they are not enough. So I've tried to figure out this, and I've asked myself, what is the problem that we are facing? And I think, Mr. Speaker, I have noticed a few problems since I was elected, also concerning our youth. And the first one, I think, Mr. Speaker, is the issue of the mindset. A lot of our youth come out of university, come out of school, and expect to be employed because they have good papers. The reality on the ground is that really there are not enough jobs. And so maybe the issue of employment by others needs to now start being reconsidered. And they need to start figuring out how to probably themselves become employers so that they could also adapt. Maybe those who are educated can be employers and also employ their colleagues who have not gotten the higher levels of education. I've also noticed that there's a problem or a difficulty in getting employed, despite the fact that some of them have very good papers. Those who choose to look for employment have barriers. We have this barrier of higher education loans board you have to have cleared, and yet you have not been employed. We have a barrier of the DCI asking for a certificate of good conduct that costs money, which we don't have. There's a barrier of ESCC. You have not even worked anywhere. You're supposed to get a clearance from the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, which you can only obviously have committed some criminal or corruption offense if you're probably working in the system of government. There is also the issue of credit worthiness. getting, credit reference bureau so that you can get employed. And also credit reference bureau whenever it comes to issues to do with borrowing. We also have another problem, and this is us, the politicians. We constantly misuse our youth, and we deceive them. I remember about 3-4 years ago in last parliament, when youth of Machakos County were invited to the Machakos People's Park. That is a big, big stadium. And they were promised all manner of heaven. And they were told they will get employment. And very big banners were put all over. And these youth came from all over the county, even some also from outside the county. And the expectation was that they would go and register. And the advert was that you will come in as seeking for employment, and you meet employers, and right there you get employed. So a lot of youth were there in their thousands and thousands, tens of thousands. But I'll tell you that from the ones I represent, we've not had any getting employed through that initiative. So there is misuse of youth by politicians, which constantly happens whenever we are near an election, because of course the youth have the numbers to ensure that someone gets elected into office. So it is important, Mr. Speaker, that we try and address these issues. Now, I want to propose quick solutions because my time is running out, and the first one would be we find a way of training our youth and create.
Very well. Honorable. Order, Honorable. The measuring of the time is quite scientific. You'd have to order your... but nevertheless, I heard from the mover that there will be a bill around this issue. So clearly there will even be further opportunities. Honorable Okelo Odoyo, member for Nyando.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you. Recently, Kenya National Bureau of Statistics carried out a survey that did paint a grim picture on the unemployment levels in this country. Mr. Speaker, we got to learn that over 8 million Kenyans are unemployed. 2 million of that figure are desperately looking for work to this very day. Some of them have actually gone back to school to further their studies in the hope that after regraduation, will put their hands in some gainful employment. Even the few who have jobs, Mr. Speaker, most of them are in low cadre, poor paying jobs, and most are constantly exploited by their employers. Then what awaits them again is the family responsibilities. There is already a very thin monetary gain from these few people. But then the family pressure in terms of budgetary allocations are exerted on this small money that at the end of the day, we see nothing but a gleeful picture on these families. Youth unemployment has been described as a ticking bomb, Mr. Speaker, with frustrated young men and women susceptible to drugs, prostitution, some lured into terrorism and other indoctrinated groups that create harm to our republic. Some enroll in drugs, and some are utterly desperate. The country is now banking on the manufacturing sector, which is one of the key pillars in Jubilee government's 4-point agenda. With this kind of proposed monies to handle youth affairs, it will offer a platform that will cushion and augment the manufacturing sector and hence create employment to many desperate Kenyans. Underemployment, Mr. Speaker, is rampant, and this simply means that graduates get jobs that can as well be done by Form 4 leavers. Employment means, if this will be made into a bill and will be an act, that it will create a wider tax base, that more tax revenues will be in place, strong purchasing power will follow, and hence a stable nation. So instead of overtaxing the few who are employed, let us widen the scope of employment so that the government does not necessarily have to impose heavy penalties on Kenyans, but with a wider taxation base, there will be adequate revenue to run our affairs. I, in retrospect, therefore, support the declaration of youth unemployment as a national disaster and subsequent establishment of a national youth fund. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Shall we have Honorable Dawood Lahim?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would want to support this motion, but there are a few things the mover of the motion said earlier, and I think I need to correct him in what he said. When he said that the betting in the bill was reduced, the 35%, I believe he did not understand it. It was never reduced. What was done was a reallocation. The 35% still stands. 35% in the sense that 15% is the betting companies and 20% goes to the people who win the bets. Like the one who won yesterday is going to pay
Therefore, you find youth are really frustrated all over. Youth cannot get employed because of so many strings attached on some of these employments. And there's an outcry whereby most of the youth, Mr. Speaker, are crying all over that the old are being recycled for the jobs and making them not to have anything to do or anything to support them in their endeavors. As much as we have put the middle colleges, like the polytechnics and so forth, but they still be asked to go and pay money for help for them to be cleared to get an employment somewhere. So arrangements will be made so that some of these youth, once they come out of these TVETs from university, they are able to be innovators, they are able to start small businesses or small companies whereby most of them will be able to employ others and they'll be able to exercise what they have learned from the colleges. And also maybe the fund that is there already that is existing, the youth fund, there are also strings attached which are making the youth shy away from it. So once this National Youth Fund is established, this can make the rules are put in place and every mechanism put in place, then the youth are able to acquire the funds and make them get more or start small industries that can be of use and also employ other youth. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is a time. Somebody was talking of the 4 agenda and he has talked about the youth and the youth. This is a time bomb in the waiting. Things must be set up. This fund should be set up so that it can assist our youth instead of our youth idling. We have seen so many youth out there taking drugs, doing what? Because now some of them, they are hopeless. And to restore a sense of hope, this youth needs to be established so that our youth can have something to do. For this matter, Mr. Speaker, sir, I support this motion.
Honorable Olesankok David.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, and for giving me this opportunity. Honorable Speaker, and from the onset, let me say that I support the motion by Honorable Anthony Oluoch. The motion is really timely, and I hope it will not be like other motions which we passed in this House, and then it will just collect dust in the shelves. Honorable Speaker, for sure, unemployed youth is a time bomb. One, they are vulnerable to radicalization. And you know what radicalization, especially from the Al-Shabaab wing, have done to our country. what radicalization in terms of Mungiki, Chingororos, and Baghdad boys have done to our country. So, Honorable Speaker, when youth are unemployed, they are vulnerable to be radicalized into these terror groups. Honorable Speaker, again, they are vulnerable to drug addiction, to alcoholism, to immorality. And this will not only destroy the future of our youth, but the entire future of our country. That is why, Honorable Speaker, such motions need to be discussed soberly and for all of us to make sure that we have followed it up to the implementation stage so that there does not collect dust in our shelves. Honorable Speaker, we have also to ask ourselves, and first of all, congratulate our president for being recognized recently in America as one of the best presidents in terms of youth empowerment because of policies that he have put in place and funds that he have put in place to try and assist the youth. Now our question is, where are we going wrong in ACPO? Because ACPO was supposed to empower youth, women, and persons with disabilities. But we have not seen that empowerment trickling down into engaging our youth in productive activities that are of economic benefit to them. Honorable Speaker, we have the ways of fund. If today we ask all these members of parliament and even members of public, what is the impact of that youth fund? And that is not chicken change, billions of shillings. Honorable Speaker, so when a fund is suggested to be formed that will be administered through CDF, Honorable Speaker, in this House, we will support, especially to be administered by our women rep, because they have shown them some level of dignity in administering the National Government Affirmative Action Fund. Honorable Speaker, I see Honorable Nyoro and Honorable KJ becoming a bit uncomfortable. Honorable Speaker, and whenever we talk of employment, let us not talk of unemployment of youth alone. Let us also talk of the percentage that will be given to persons with disability, because it is in our Constitution, Article 54, that 5% of every employment should go to persons with disability. And I think in this motion, it should be around 15%, because that is the population of persons with disability in this country. Because my time is up, Honorable Speaker, as a House, we need to give solution. One of the solutions that I believe is beneficial to us is that let us give tax exemption to importation of wood so that we can conserve our forests, destroy the forests of Uganda, destroy the forests of DRC Congo, and import that wood and manufacture furnitures, and will be exporters of furnitures. Youth will get employment there. And again, let us rethink the issue of our education system. When it's only a degree that is required, all of them cannot be managers. We must have plumbers, electricians, and mason people so that they can get employment. So let us also make sure that our education system is compatible with the job market. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Ekamais, member for Loima.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to thank Honorable Anthony Olot for bringing this very serious and timely motion. Honorable Speaker, I think our country is grappling with a myriad of issues, one of which is trying to stabilize the economy of this country. Secondly,
weight of this matter, that basically the youths are so unengaged that preventing them to do some of the things that they try to do to ventilate their frustrations, it becomes very difficult. Mr. Speaker, let me join the other members by describing youth and unemployment as a time bomb. The most productive age generally happens to be the youthful age. And Mr. Speaker, the wealth of a country is not in its minerals. It's not in terms of infrastructure. It is actually how well the country manages to tap in its own human resource. And if you look at what happened to South Korea, which now at one point was way below where Kenya was, and now is miles apart. If you compare with Kenya, is one of the most advanced developed worlds. And during one of the visits to Korea, South Korea, and I managed to ask one of the persons, how did you manage to get to all this? They said they borrowed some of the designs from Kenya, but they capitalized on their human resource. This big percentage of useful human resource that we are leaving behind. A country that invests so much in infrastructure and forgets to carry along the youths and every other person really is like a husband who is so busy working hard to buy sofa sets, big fridges, everything, but has no time for the wife and kids. When actually these people, all what they need is to have this person recognized and carry them along in the system. Mr. Speaker, there is a big percentage of youths who are willing to work, but unfortunately, they do not have the jobs. And they basically threatens the future of these individuals and the economy at large.
Honorable Musa Musioka, I'm afraid the House must rise. It is 1 p.m.
Thank you, Mr.
Speaker. Now, that doesn't mean your minutes are done, extinguished. You have a balance when this motion is back of 2 minutes, so that you have a total of 5 minutes.
Much obliged.
For honorable members, the motion will still find its way back. We will have a balance of that 1 minute when this motion is scheduled back by the House business. So the members who haven't spoken, we still have a balance of that 1 minute.
Thank you.
Honorable members, the time being 1 p.m., this House starts adjourned till today, Wednesday,